Welcome to the Mentium Matters podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I'm Solveig Brown, and today I am so excited to have Lan Phan as my guest. Lan is an author and speaker known for her expertise on purpose, mindset, and continuous improvement. She is the author of Do This Daily: Secrets to Finding Success, Happiness, and Purpose in Work and Life. Her content on LinkedIn and YouTube reaches millions of people annually. She advises C suite executives in Fortune 500 companies. Lan's thought leadership has been featured in publications such as Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Money. Lan has also been a keynote speaker at the United Nations, Stanford University, NYU Law School, and many Fortune 100 companies. Many of you had the privilege of hearing Lan speak at our recent Mentium Business Education webinar, where she talked about setting clear intentions and goals. So today, Lan is joining me to share foundational principles and best practices for taking daily action to create transformational change in your life. We'll talk about the importance of support in making sustainable changes and how to keep your momentum going even when you face fear or resistance. Lan will also share her advice for staying grounded during times of uncertainty. Welcome, Lan. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sylvie. I'm so excited, and I love what Mentium does, and this is like the perfect conversation to start the new year.
Oh, it totally is. So, Lan, you have such an inspiring story of how you got to where you are. Like, you have millions of people that you influence through LinkedIn and YouTube each year. Can you tell us more about how you got here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you kind of go way back, I write about purpose and finding your meaning. That is my the topic that I talk most about, that and mindset. But I always joke around that I was in my mom womb trying to figure out my why. My name is Lan, and I'm the CEO and founder of Community of Seven. The author of Do This Daily. So my journey kind of started as, I guess, as a founder of Community of Seven at the beginning of the pandemic. So I had been hired by Alan Murray, who's the CEO of Fortune magazine, to build a startup within Fortune, a multi-million dollar startup. And it was my dream job. I got to hire number five, and then the pandemic hit. And I got laid off. And what's worse was I had to lay off my entire team. And it was at that point where I realized that I was defining my self-worth based on my job. And so for me, that was like the big pivotal moment in my life. And I remember falling into this deep depression, and I didn't get out of bed for like a week and didn't shower. The house was a mess. And I just remember my daughter, who was in kindergarten at 5 at the time, shaking me and just saying, "Mommy, I love you even without a job." And that was the big
Oh,
aha.
wow.
That was a big aha
Hmm.
moment for me. And I realized that I was defining my success, my purpose based on exterior, um, notions of what success looked like. And for me, that started my journey in terms of finding my why and my purpose. And I realized that here I was in my 40s, and I couldn't answer that simple question of what mattered most to me or what brings me happiness. And so that was like the start of my journey, starting Community of Seven. And a lot of that was in the initial stages, bringing executives together and really helping them find their why and their purpose.
That is such a powerful story, about this journey of self-discovery that started with a major setback.
Mhm.
And I think it really shows that, we all have setbacks in our life, and it's like sometimes they really force you to dig deep, and they become a catalyst for change. They put you in a direction that you didn't necessarily anticipate, especially when you had a dream job lined up. On a recent post, you said it's never too late to change your life. Change
Mhm.
doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small, consistent action we choose every day, one intentional step at a time. Everything changes when you realize that the best version of yourself is not a future version, but a daily choice. I love that quote. So, There are so many people that want to make meaningful changes in their lives. Can you go over some of the foundational principles that are required to create successful change and transformation?
One of the reasons why a lot of us are unhappy is because we keep on moving the finish line. And so we never stop and just have gratitude or appreciations for how far we've been. What I write about in my book, there's four things in terms of if you want true transformation. It always starts with the why. And I work with a lot of executives. And the first thing I ask them is, what brings you joy? What brings you happiness? And 90% of the time, there's silence. These CEOs, these founders could easily recite benchmarks and goals for their companies. But when I ask them what brings you joy and happiness, there's silence because they haven't asked themselves that question. And what I always say is if you're not able to articulate that, how do you expect to get there? It's understanding what matters to you, understanding what's important to you. For some people, they could consider this their core values. For me, I realized that I had based success on how much money I made, what school I went to, all of the outside trappings of what success looked like. I was miserable because I was, traveling 85% of the time. I barely saw my daughter. And then when I started to really peel the onion in terms of what mattered to me and ask myself what mattered most to me, it was my family, it was my faith, it was being of service to others, and it was freedom. But none of the things I was doing in the past fulfilled any of those four values, the things that were most important to me. I said my family was the most important thing to me, but I would leave 5 in the morning and come back at 10 o'clock at night on the weekdays and not see my daughter. And by the time the weekend rolled in, I was too exhausted to be present for her. And I think what I'm saying is not new because I'm sure a lot of people, because a lot of executives I talk to have had the same experience. I've reached the top of my career, but I barely know my children. I think the first step is really identifying what matters most to you. The second part is really about mindset, right? Your mindset is shaping your reality. So, we can talk about Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset. Um, I really love Henry Ford's quote, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Because it's this notion of, do you believe you can? Do you have the resilience? Do you have the strength? When you fall, are you immediately getting up? Or do you just kind of lay there and just let the world consume you? So the second part is really about having the mindset. So knowing what matters to you, having the mindset. And the third part is really about habits, right? And systems. Your habits are shaping your future self. You also have to couple that with the action, and the actions are what we do daily. I talk to a lot of people who have imposter syndrome and doubt and confidence issues. And the thing I always tell them is, congratulations. That means you're stretching yourself, right? I would worry more if you didn't have that imposter syndrome. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's where incompetent people are very confident in their abilities. But part of that is because they don't understand the level of effort it needs to actually be good at that craft. Prime example are kids, right? Kids, when they grow up, they're like, I want to be LeBron James. I want to be the best singer. I'm going to be, and they might not have the musical talent or even the height to be at that level. But it's that Dunning-Kruger effect. You don't know the level of effort that you need. So when someone has imposter syndrome, when someone has doubt, for me, that's an indicator that they probably are good enough, that they are competent, and definitely competent enough to know that they need to hone their craft in order to get to an excellent level, right? And so the building of habits, what we do daily is really important. So no one is born excellent at what they do. No one. Some people have natural talent, yes, natural height, natural abilities, but you need to refine them. You need to practice daily. You need to make these small decisions to get good at whatever it is that you want to get good at. And we have all of us have the ability to get good at anything we set our minds to through practice, through repetition. but it first starts with doing. So that's where the daily kind of habits come. And the fourth thing that I talk about in my book, Do This Daily, is really about change requires changing who we are. If we really truly want something, we need to become what we aspire to be. The other thing is really about your community. Um, there's a great quote, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? So if you are someone who wants to be an executive one day and you are maybe junior in your position, right? Most of the time you hang out with other people who are of the same level. But if you want to be an executive, what does an executive do? They maybe talk to different people within the organization. They will have lunch meetings. They will connect with different folks within the organization, not just their division, right? They're constantly building these connections that they can turn to when in need, right? So you're modeling that based on your community. And the last part of that in terms of what you can really control is your environment. And I'll leave it with this because I think it's a strong example. My mother has advanced stage dementia. So for the past few years, I've been on this mission to live as long as I can because once again, what's my number one value? My family. To live as long as I can mentally and physically so that I can be there for my daughter, so I can walk her down the aisle and see her get married and have meet my grandkids one day. That is my passion and that is my why, right? So a few years ago, I started to try to get in better shape. So I first started to go to the local gym. And let me first premise to say that I am a soccer mom and I also am qualified for AARP. But I was at this gym and it was mainly soccer moms and people who were retired. I was looking at the weights, because I would take the classes and the heaviest weights were like 10 pounds, maybe. I was one of the strongest people in there and I was carrying the 10 pounds and I was so proud of myself. So I was like, ooh, look at me, look at my muscles, right? So months later, I ended up joining like a CrossFit club. I get there, I look at the weights. The lightest weight was 20 pounds, I think. And so this is an example of when your environment changes, your community changes, your systems and your habits changes, right? I basically had to change everything. The workouts I went to, times that I went to, I started making connections and friendships, and I started carrying heavy. And so now I can dead weight 150 pounds.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
but that isn't in that it's not that my physical limits changed. It was because my environment, my systems, the the weights, they didn't have anything less than 20 pounds. And so because my environment changed, because the community changed, because my systems and habits changed, I was able to level up from carrying a 10-pound dumbbell and thinking it was heavy to now being able to deadlift 150 pounds. But in terms of transformation, it seems difficult, but a lot of it is if you tackle these four things, happen pretty seamlessly. Change requires change, changing who we are, right? I changed my environment, I changed the systems. So that's kind of a long answer to your question.
The you have to start with the why. You have to have a compelling why that is so compelling that will motivate you every day, every way.
Yeah.
And the way you've explained how all these things are interconnected, that that your community affects your environment affects what you do, is really brilliant of how to create change. So
In terms of the why, it's so, I mean, I just want people to understand how important it is because a lot of people talk about the why, but they make it almost a little bit superficial. Like, well, I want to lose weight because I want to be healthy. That's too vague.
yeah.
For me, I didn't change my habits till I started seeing my mom, who's in advanced stage dementia, and she didn't take care of her health for decades because she was so focused on us, the kids. And for me, just looking at my daughter and just thinking, I want to see her walk down the aisle. I want to be able to see my grandkids one day. That is a strong emotion that elicits feelings in here. So the why has to be big enough, not just I want to be healthy, I want to live for a long time, or I want to fit in my jeans. Your why has to make you feel something deep down inside because we're motivated either by pain or pleasure. And so you have to tap into one of those, either pain or pleasure.
Totally. And for those of you aren't watching this, I could see the shift. When you were just talking about coming up with your why, like your whole body changed, your whole face lit up, and you're like, and it's like as soon as you talked about that, I was like, oh yeah, she was going to make all these health changes because of that, and
Mhm.
also putting health in the category of prioritizing your health is prioritizing your family because it's prioritizing
Exactly.
your future and your ability to be there for your daughter at a
Yeah.
later date that's so important. And I like how sometimes there's a roundabout way of getting to something else
Sure.
and that your values inform not just one particular area, but a whole, like everything in your life.
Yeah.
I liked how you talked about you run everything through your values. Does this conform with my values or not?
Mm.
So, that's such a great, inspiring overview. So, let's say someone has figured out their why. They're like, these are, my North Star. These are the things that make me wake up in the morning. This is what brings me joy. This is what I want to do. Where do you suggest that people start? What's that first step?
First, understand where you want to head, right? Like, let's say I want to be an athlete. I'm a couch potato. I want to be an athlete, right? So you have to ask yourself, what are the different steps I need to do? And I think the problem is for most people, they go straight out and just try to run a marathon, right? Before they can break it down. So I think part of it is keep it as simple as possible. There's a book, Tiny Habits, building these tiny, small habits. Okay, I'm going to walk a block. Then the block would turn into, okay, I'm gonna walk for 10 minutes and I'm gonna walk a mile. The important thing is to start and just kind of create these tiny habits that you can do daily. So every day, maybe you watch a webinar, maybe you create a system. Like, for example, there's this book called Miracle Morning. And in this book, they talk about having a morning routine by Hal Elrod. It's a good book, recommend you reading it. But he talks about creating a morning routine. He has 6 steps. So he talks about creating those systems, but doing it daily. So whatever yours is, because for some people they might look at that and be overwhelmed by doing those 6 things in the morning. But it could just be you reading the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, or reading a trade publication daily, just one paragraph every day, reading 2 pages from a book daily that is going to help you get to where you need to go. So if I'm going to, I remember the first time I ran my marathon, I had no idea where to start. And what I did was I just read a book on how to, run a marathon. Then you actually have to do. You can't just learn. You have to go to the next step, which is action, which is my, third chapter is, it's about action. And so maybe you run a block, then it becomes a mile, then a mile becomes 2, and then 5 miles and 10 miles, and then you run a 10K. So you break things down to the smallest part and you start with the smallest part that you can easily do with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
And I think that's why most New Year's resolutions um, are broken, is because people
Hmm.
make their goals too big and they focus
Yeah.
on the goal and they don't focus on the action. If I'm a
Yeah.
junior leader, generally I connect with, I'm just going to stay in my lane. If
Hmm.
you're at director level, if you're a VP level, if you are C-suite, those are different connections that you have within the organizations. Right. And so that's where you're building sponsors and building your mentors. And I think that's why Mentium is so great at really that whole notion of like mentorship. But it's about those relationships within an organization.
Yeah, well, you bring up a great point of the support, and you talk about it in your community. So many of the people listening are in, mentoring partnerships through Mentium. So can you talk more about the importance of leveraging the support for when you're trying to make changes in your life?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think mentorship is so important. And also sponsorship, right? Because
Mhm.
mentorship are the people and the advocates within an organization that help guide us, give us like kind of knowledge and advice. But we also kind of need to build up relationships with sponsors that are actually going to be saying our names in rooms that we're not present in and recommending us for that promotion or like challenge roles. With that said, It's all based on building relationships and connections. Doesn't matter if it's a mentorship or sponsorship or whether you're being a mentee, right? Go back to that quote where the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? And so even within an organization, like, do you have people advocating for you? And in order for someone to advocate for you, you need to build trust. What I hear a lot from people and how I grew up, I was taught that you work hard, put your head down, and you'll get rewarded. But that's not the case in corporate America, right? Hard work and being good at what you do is a baseline. That's expected.
Mhm.
Once you get there, in order to, become a director or VP and to get higher up in the ranks, it's about visibility. It's about leadership. It's about inspiring people. It's about, being able to see around the corner. It's all of these untangible things that, you're not necessarily taught in school, right? It's about these kind of sidebar conversations that you have outside of the meetings. And so that's where the relationships are really important. Understanding who the players are within companies, right? And you can, a lot of times, especially when you're first starting out, only understand that through relationships.
Right.
Having that mentor, having like I've been in situations where I've been in companies where I had someone who worked there for 20 years, like, Lan, you want to avoid this person, or, the way to get this person to advocate for you is to do this, right? And it's not about being deceitful. It's about understanding people's psychology, right? And really being able to understand because everyone is different. Everyone has a different way that they're motivated. So when you're looking at, like, emotional intelligence, when you're looking at all these things, it's always about relationships, and it's about connecting with people and building trust at the end of the day. Um, those two things can take you far.
Oh, totally. That is just such a good reminder of the importance of, building those authentic, genuine connections with people throughout your organization or your community. Okay, what about when people are excited to make the change, or they're going so far, and then all of a sudden they hit something like fear, resistance, or just kind of something that stops them up? How do you suggest that people sustain momentum when they hit some kind of block, whether it be internal or external?
Definitely understand and been there, done that. um, it kind of goes back to your systems and your habits. Because your motivation is going to wane at some point. Because motivation will get you so far. Because at the beginning of anything, you're really excited, and so the motivation helps propel you and pushes you. And that's anything in life. When we start an exercise routine or we're trying to get that promotion at work, you're going to feel that initial push and it's going to motivate you. And at some point, it's going to be like, oh, I haven't gotten a promotion yet, and you're going to get discouraged. And this is where your systems and your habits kick in.
Hmm.
I'm raising my hand and speaking up during meetings. And so what happens is that becomes your default habit of raising your hand. The default of reading up or watching, going to conferences and events, connecting with people. That becomes your default. And so with or without the motivation, it just becomes who you are. And this is why the last chapter of Change Requires Changing Who We Are becomes important, because you're not going to
Right.
have the motivation all the time. But if you have the habits and the systems, that's just
Hmm.
part of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great example of how to leverage that so then it doesn't just become will all the time.
Yes,
It's like you're like, oh, that's just what I do. And you've got all these cues and stuff. So, Lan, I just want to pivot a little bit in this conversation because one of the topics you post about is how to deal with uncertain times. Since I've got you here, could you just talk for a few minutes about what are some of your strategies for staying grounded when there are a lot of changes in your environment?
definitely. And, looking at this past year, there's been a lot of changes and challenges for a lot of people, especially, with the economy, unrest in the world. Is that a lot of times we look into what we're most afraid of when we are uncertain. Well, we're afraid, we hyper focus on the things we want to avoid, right? And I think the lesson of that focus on where you want to go, not what you fear, is important because it's really about focusing on the things that are in your control. One of the things that, is often said is control the controllables, right?
Mhm.
Because if we focus on the things we can't control, we're going to feel helpless. We're going to feel hopeless. But if we, I can't control who gets elected. I can't control that there's war happening overseas. I can't control inflation. But what I can control is the community of people I surround myself with. I can control how I volunteer for the food bank in my neighborhood. I can focus on being a good mother, right? Being a good colleague, being a good employee, right? Those are the things I can control. And the more we focus and like we take a breath, I'm a firm believer in meditation as well. The reason why meditation is so important is it brings us back to the present moment. And when we feel fearful, when we feel stressed, when we feel overwhelmed, it's because we're in our minds and we're thinking about either the past, um, things that happened, the wrongs that happened to us in the past, or future fears, things that haven't happened. And those are all mental constructs. The only thing we can really control is this present moment, my actions at this moment. And we focus on the here and now and the things that we can control, we start to gain control over our lives. And once you can get control over your lives, the other things will still be around that, calamities and all this other stuff. But we're able to kind of be agents of change in our lives. And once we're able to do that, then we start gaining confidence. Then we're able to kind of build the systems and the habits and the things where we're able to, surround yourself with people who love you, and just do more of that each day.
Oh,
To
I love that. Control the controllable and be in the present. Just breathe and be
Yeah,
right here,
yeah.
right now. So, Lan, we are coming to the end of our time. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for being here. But you have so many wonderful, inspiring, uplifting quotes that you share on LinkedIn. And to those of you listening, if you don't follow Lan on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it because you will just see wonderful things each day. So, what is a quote you would like to send us off with today?
Okay, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give you two because
Oh, that's even
they're
better.
interrelated.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love it.
So the two quotes that I kind of live by, one is by Lao Tzu, and it's
Okay.
a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? So if you're not sure where to start, just start. Do something
Um,
small, and every
that
day just continue, right?
So
Um,
perfect what we've been talking about. Wow. Yeah.
the second quote, which is interrelated, is it's a Japanese proverb: "Fall 7 times, get up 8."
Oh,
So what matters most is not that you fall. And, I think people are so afraid of failure. But what I always tell people is failure is part of the process. In order to get good at anything, in order to really achieve your dreams, you will need to fail.
right.
Part of the process. What's most important is that you don't give up. So even if you
Hmm.
fall 7 times, get up 8 times. And so just keep on getting up. So those are the two.
Keep on getting up. I love that. That is a great place to end. Keep on getting up. Lan, it has been such a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know how incredibly busy you are. For those of you who haven't read Lan's book, I highly recommend it. It's got lots of just great, really practical exercises that you can do, great ways, great questions to ask, to think about, and just kind of set up in a four-pillar way. So thanks for the best practices, for the reminder of just start with your first step and to build build daily habits and systems that can keep you in place. This has just been fantastic. And you are an inspirational reminder that every day we can choose to be the best version of ourselves. It's not a future version, it's right now, right here in this moment. So thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Mentium Matters podcast. We have many great guests lined up, so be sure to join us next time. Thank you.